On holiday over the Christmas break. We'll keep on talking about it throughout the program. As it stands, though, they could be eligible as returning travelers to receive up to $1,000 from the federal government for missing work due to quarantine requirements. Dominic LeBlanc is the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. He joins us now live from Moncton. Hi, Minister. Good to see you. Happy New Year. Thank you for making the time.
Well, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you, Vashi, and congratulations. 2021 will be a great year for you. I'm very happy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That's very kind of you. I have a number of questions on the vaccine rollout across the country, but I do want to start off on what appears to be a loophole. I know that your government, and this is with the recovery benefit, it's for people who essentially need to quarantine, maybe because, of a close contact, maybe because they've traveled, and they're eligible for this benefit. But travelers, it appears, would also be eligible for it. Your government says you're actively looking at addressing that. Have you made a decision on how you'll do that?
Vashi, you're right. We understand the public understandable frustration with what is an abuse, what is a loophole. The idea that you can voluntarily decide to disrespect public health advice, go on an international trip and come back, and because you have to quarantine, somehow apply for a sickness benefit makes no sense at all. It's an accident of law. It was a law, Vashi, that was passed unanimously by the House of Commons. So every opposition party voted for it. But we share the frustration of Canadians and will ensure that that loophole is plugged quickly. And we'll have more to say in the next couple of days. It probably requires a legislative solution. If that's the case, we'll obviously work with opposition parties to put it in place at the first opportunity, because it's an unacceptable use of what is an essential benefit, as you said, to protect somebody who may be forced into a quarantine, not have sick leave benefits, not be eligible for employment insurance. These people need an income replacement when they stay home, not to go to work, to protect the public. It wasn't meant to be a bonus for some irresponsible trip you took.
Do you have, or does the federal government have any concept of how many people have used it for that reason?
No, we don't. We think that it's probably a very small amount, but one is too many. In terms of abusing that benefit. My colleague, the Minister of National Revenue, is looking at a way to be sure that people who may think that it's appropriate to try and claim that benefit before we plug the loophole, before we get rid of it, will be subject to obviously a strict verification. We think, Vashi, to be fair, to technically qualify, you have to not be eligible for employer sick leave benefits. You have to not be eligible for employment insurance. Some MLA that traveled abroad that continued to collect his or her salary when they returned would obviously not qualify. So it's a narrow group, but it clearly is unacceptable that one person would be eligible for that benefit in those travel-related circumstances. So we're going to get rid of that and make sure that nobody can abuse it that way.
You said it probably requires legislation. Does that mean that you anticipate the earliest there could be a change is when the House reconvenes?
Again, we'll have more information in the next couple of days on that, Vashi. If that's the case, we would obviously seek to work with the opposition parties that supported the original bill, as I said, to make sure that we find the fastest way to plug this loophole. And my colleague, the Minister of Employment and the Government House Leader, will have something more to say very quickly on that.
Okay, Minister, you're in charge of the relationship between provinces and the federal government, so I do want to ask you about the vaccine rollout as well. And I want to preface my questions to you by saying I know that there's a lot of provincial jurisdiction here and a lot of questions for provincial ministers. And I'll tell you, in our audience, we asked for many of them, including Alberta's and Ontario's, and they all declined our request. So I want to ask you, as far as the federal perspective is concerned, when you look at the data, for example, collected by our World in Data, which is a University of Oxford-based organization, the total number of vaccination doses administered per 100 people for Canada is about 0.3. In the US, it's 1.28. The UK, 1.39. In Israel, it's 12.59. Why is the rollout here going so slowly?
Vashi, that's a very good question. We're obviously concerned about that. We have delivered over 400,000 doses already to provinces and territories. Hundreds of thousands more are coming this week and next week. And many of them are stuck in freezers at various provincial hospitals or vaccination sites. So we're going to work with provinces as best as we can to ensure that if the Government of Canada can support them in some other way to increase and expedite the delivery of these vaccines to people, we obviously will. But vaccination, as you noted, is properly a provincial responsibility. Vashi, I was in many meetings with provincial premiers and the Prime Minister where they were very clear to say to us, this is a provincial responsibility. The Government of Canada paid for all the vaccines, bought many of the freezers, delivered them to provinces, even paid for the alcohol swabs and the syringes that they need to administer them. So we now expect provinces to raise their game and get those vaccines out as quickly as possible. And we share the concern of Canadians that they're not as effective in a freezer as they are in somebody's arm.
Given what we've seen so far, though, at the provincial level, is there a requirement or is it necessary that the federal government provide more of a coordination role? I'm speaking to someone, I had spoken to them earlier, the interview will air in a bit, from Israel involved in the rollout there. Part of the success is because of health services being so centralized. Obviously, we're not a perfect comparison. It's a different setup in Israel than it is here. And I know the provinces feel a certain way about jurisdiction. But is there a point at which the federal government needs to step in order to ensure people in this country get vaccinated?
And you're right. Canada is a federation where the delivery of healthcare services are, as the premiers always remind us, provincial jurisdiction. So we want to respect that, but we also want to respect the understandable public urgency to deliver these vaccines as quickly as possible into people's arms, to vaccinate people. That was why we were so pleased to get early doses in December. The Government of Canada has worked very hard to procure aggressively and consistently this vast portfolio of vaccines. So we're going to work collaboratively with provinces to say, look, is there something that we can do? Can the Canadian Red Cross, for example, supplement efforts? I know that some provincial governments may want to help other provincial governments with surplus resources, but this is going to be an ongoing conversation we're going to have with provinces because we share the urgency, and I've seen it expressed in very dramatic ways by frontline healthcare workers of the importance of getting on with vaccinating people as quickly as we can. Our job is to procure the vaccines and deliver them to the provinces, and we're going to continue to focus every day on that as well.
I just have a few seconds left, Minister, but it's your government that told Canadians the majority of them would be vaccinated by the fall of now this year. Is that still possible?
We think so, Vashi. We have no reason to think that's not the case. Whatever challenges are there in terms of provincial authorities ramping up vaccinations, we're not concerned that objective cannot be met. But look, if we can meet it 1 week ahead of schedule, 2 weeks ahead of schedule, that's fantastic. So every hour and every day that we're not getting those vaccines effectively into people's arms, frankly, is a risk that we don't need to take. So we share the urgency and we'll work with provinces to support them in any way we can.
Okay, Minister, I'll leave it there. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Vashi. Have a great evening.
You too. Dominic LeBlanc is the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. As you heard off the top of that interview, there is a loophole in which people who return from traveling overseas can access up to $1,000 through one of the benefits that the federal government offers for people who have to quarantine. That conversation came about because of what's been happening across a number of provinces in this country. Specifically, we talked earlier about politicians in Alberta who traveled abroad over the holidays. A bunch of other elected officials also left the country for various reasons. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.